Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to another episode of Breaking the Silos, where we talk about DevOps, where we discuss how your organization can embrace DevOps. And if you are a developer that you are thinking of getting into DevOps, this is the podcast where we talk about resources, necessary things that you need to know, and your mindset coming to DevOps. So we've been having this since 2023, and we're having the first episode of 2024, and I promise you, you will enjoy it. I have this first episode we have in our midst. Didi, Didi has been in the community. She's a cloud native ambassador. She's doing a lot of things, and I believe we will enjoy her today. She has worked with a company that based on Kubernetes and all. So that's why she's here to talk to us about cloud natives, Kubernetes specifically, and how we can get started as a developers, as an organization, or wherever things you are doing. So we'll be bringing her on board. Okay, welcome, Didi. I hope can you hear
Hi.
me? Yeah,
Yes, I can
good.
hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Yeah, we have
Awesome.
somebody joining us already. Yeah, welcome, Gabriel. Thanks for joining us this evening. Yeah, we will not disappoint you. Yeah, thanks for joining. Okay, so Didi, you're welcome. We are happy to see you on the show today. And
Thank you.
thanks for everything that you have been doing for the community. I think we can get started. And
Yes.
for our participants, as you are joining, I'll be dropping your question or whatever it is you want to drop in the chat. We can see everybody. Thank you so much for joining us as well. So, Didi, let's start with a bit introduction about you. Many did not know you. I can say I don't know you, sir. Yeah, that's true. The last time we worked together was KCD Africa 2022 that we organized together back then.
Mhm.
So we just want to know you better. So tell us about yourself, your background, your experience, and all. Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Edidiong Asikpo. I often go by Didi, which is a short version of Edidiong because my name can be quite hard to pronounce if you're not from Akwa Ibom, which is like, I mean, assuming anybody listens to this outside of Nigeria, which is like a state in Nigeria, right? And throughout my life, because I remember I schooled in Enugu of like been to places, and I would always experience people muttering my name, like not pronouncing it well. So I just started out, hey, I think it's time I also add Didi as like a second option for people to call me by. So I work as a senior developer advocate. I really started out my career as an Android developer. And then I've like made a couple of switches since then. Because honestly, one thing I truly believe in is being okay. I mean, taking leaps to change your career path, right? Like even if you started as an Android developer, it doesn't mean that your path should end as an Android developer. You could always make a switch. So I switched from like Android then did a bit of like web development in between of my career, and then eventually transitioned to the cloud native space in like 2021, I think, around 2021 thereabout. And it's been a journey where like lots of learnings, identifying new things. But then I would say that one great thing was that there's like a strong cloud native community. There were people willing to like help you out. There was like content out there to help you understand. There was a CNCF as well, which also had like resources and people together just to make like your whole journey into the cloud native and like Kubernetes ecosystem a lot easier. I mean, of course, nothing's really easy, but it just makes it like a lot easier to also access people to ask questions and just like find resources. So, yeah, that's what brought me here. It's been like a great journey so far, and I'm excited to see what next or where next life takes me to.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like listening to your experience and what you've done in the community, it's a lot. But one thing you did not mention, you did not tell us you were once a CNCF ambassador or something
Oh,
like.
I mean, I feel like at times you forget to mention these things. Oh yes, I'm also a CNCF ambassador, and I became a CNCF ambassador like sometime last year, and this is like a really amazing thing because it's pretty much the CNCF recognizing people in the community who are either spreading the word about like CNCF products or contributing to open source projects in regards to CNCF. So it's been truly an honor to be selected as a CNTM ambassador again because of the recent transition that I made to the cloud native space and how I had to deal with like all of those struggles of, oh, did I make the right decision? Should I have feedback in web development? Can I actually understand this thing? All of that part and like trying to write the CCAT exams, eventually passing, dealing with times where I really didn't understand what was going on, but then still trying to push through to have some sort of understanding of like Kubernetes and all of that. So I would say that it showed me that if you really put your head down to learn something or be better at something, that it's absolutely possible to do it regardless of like where you started or even if you were in a different field.
Yeah, I think that's nice. That's like a motivation for everybody joining us this evening. Wherever you are currently doing, you can be anywhere, you can learn anything, and you can excel in them. So thank you for that nuggets. We'll take it so tightly and we'll work with it. So I can see people are excited in the chat. Somebody said, "Good evening. Be looking for a way to know more about Kubernetes." That's why we are here today. We'll talk more about Kubernetes and all. So stay around, and if you have any question along the line, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll pick them up and answer them as we progress. So
Yeah.
because people are excited about Kubernetes already, can we start by talking about what is Kubernetes, what problem it solves, and all?
Sure. So the way I like to explain it is I like to think of like when you want to build an application, specifically cloud native applications, it always follows like three steps where you build the application, containerize it, and then manage the different containerized applications. So in the building of the application phase, this is where you have to use like your preferred programming language, whatever it is, to build up the application, right? And after you build this application, you then need to containerize the application to make it runnable in like any environment. And after you containerize this application, you would like let's say deploy to a registry like maybe Docker or Quay by Red Hat, for instance. And then once it's now available as like a Docker image, for instance, yeah, you can now create a container based on that image where you can now deploy into like your Kubernetes cluster or deploy into production. So let's assume that Kubernetes is not in the picture now, and you have like let's say 4 or 5 containers running that build up or make up this your cloud native application that people can access. And I mean, just like everything in life, things are bound to fail. So there's a chance that let's say one of these container fails or something happens, is like a bug or whatever, one of those things that causes the container to no longer be active. And because I mean, when something like this happens, depending on how your system is set up, you'll be reminded, or like a reminder will come up saying, hey, this container is down, go and try to fix it. So assuming you were not on your laptop at that particular moment, it means that you would miss out on that notification. And if there were people accessing your application, they will no longer be able to, because that particular container has not been restarted and hasn't been fixed or managed in the way that it's supposed to, right? And and even if you were on your application, like it may take, even if you were on your laptop, it may take like a few seconds or maybe minutes for you to even realize or or see the notification. So this is where Kubernetes comes in. Kubernetes pretty much controls or enables you to like automate, deploy, scale, and manage containerized applications in like containerized applications that make up your cloud native application, right? So instead of you to leave whatever you were doing when you're an application, a container goes down and run back to your laptop to come and fix it, Kubernetes is going to automatically spin up the new container for you. So it means that you would have like less downtime, like your end users would not have like lots of complaints because there's already an orchestrator, which Kubernetes is oftentimes called, that manages all of these containerized applications for you. Is something going down, Kubernetes starts up a new one. Does this particular container not have like a lot of resources attached to it? Kubernetes will then like do it such a way that it can then remove some resources from a particular container and replace it to another one. So I know that hearing about Kubernetes for the first time can sound very complicated. So let me share another simpler version of what Kubernetes is. So if you're listening to this, I like to think that almost everybody in the world knows about this game called football. Some people call it soccer, right? But then you know football, right? So let's think of like Barcelona, for instance. And then they have, oh no, let's think about this. I want to say Barcelona because I'm like I like Messi, but it's now like Inter Milan. So let's assume that there is this club called Inter Milan, right? And there are different players in this club, right? And then there is also a coach. Remember that a coach is somebody who manages these different players. Like if one player has an injury, the coach is going to remove that player and like decide which other player is going to come back in, right? The coach also helps like strategize what's going to happen in the football game. So think of Kubernetes as the coach, and then think of the players as the containers, right? Kubernetes is what manages these different containers. So the coach in this case is what manages the different like players. Just think of Kubernetes that way, and it will give you like a clearer picture of what Kubernetes is. Like it just helps to like orchestrate containerized applications.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. A lot of sense. Most especially the soccer, the football analogy.
Yes.
Most people watch football, and I think many people on the call today will be able to relate with that analogy. Actually, some of the key terms that may be new to people that are new to Kubernetes basically could be Docker images or images, your application images, your containers, and all of that. So I think with that analogy, we'll be able to relate to them. Okay, so they will tell you that, oh, if you want to run a Kubernetes cluster, for instance, you start with your application, then you turn your application to an image, then you turn that image to a container, which is a
Container.
running image. Yeah. After turning that, then you can manage it severally by orchestrating it through Kubernetes. Okay,
Yes.
so there are many explanations that can come around that, but then if the analogy is not clear or the meaning is not still clear to you, do well to drop it in the chat. Basically, I think that's is a bit of a straightforward explanation actually. App, image, container, Kubernetes. Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much for that. Um, Hearing this, we know that this is a good thing to plug into, but then there's nothing in this world that have advantage or that is good that does not come with a problem. So what do you
Yeah.
think will be the challenges facing developers or organizations trying to leverage on Kubernetes in their cloud native application?
Well, so I would say that the first one is like people, as much as, I mean, as someone who is in the Kubernetes space and is also a CNCF ambassador, I would definitely be on the side that, oh, everybody should like transition to like cloud native. It's like awesome, it's great, it's important, and all of that. And I do believe that there will be a certain point in time where everybody would have to make that transition, right? Because we are continuously moving to the cloud, continuously doing more and more things in the cloud. But I would say that one of the like common challenges is people not knowing when to make the transition or doing too much at the beginning, right? They just get, oh, there's this thing called Kubernetes. Now let's use it. Let's do this. Let's do that. Or let's implement this. Or let's implement that. Sort of like trying to really like ask yourself, why exactly do I need this technology? And where exactly can this technology help me at this particular point? I don't have to figure everything out. I don't have to like implement all of the features of Kubernetes. I just need to utilize it for the particular thing that I want right now. So that's what I would say is the first one. Because when you don't do that, you tend to be overwhelmed by the many. Because indeed, if you try to learn Kubernetes, you realize that it's a lot. Like there's so many components, so many things in between, and all of that. So when you think, oh, hey, I have to implement everything, you tend to feel overwhelmed. And oftentimes you now decide, okay, hey, I don't want to do this thing anymore because it's not making sense, it's not adding up, it's not giving me what I want. So, one thing I would recommend in this particular challenge is to really ask yourself what exactly you're trying to achieve with Kubernetes, and then what's like the most viable thing to implement at the moment. Like, you don't need to have everything yet, just take it step by step and then continue to build up and add up over time. And then the other one is Kubernetes. Is this like assumption or a mis? Well, I don't know. It's complicated. I don't know how to call it like a misconception. I should actually agree with you, but like people, there's if you go on like Twitter or like Reddit, for instance, you always see these funny memes about people saying that Kubernetes is like very hard to learn, and there's always like so many things involved, and it's like not one of the easiest things to learn. And indeed, I also did experience this when I started learning Kubernetes as well. And it's not that, I mean, if you think about it, there's nothing that is easy in life. Most of the things are like a bit difficult. But I feel like what really makes it seem like Kubernetes is really hard is because there is a lot of components. You would learn about pods today and like, oh my God, yes, I now know about pods. And then you realize that, oh no, you actually need to also know about services because that's like a more, like services have like more capabilities than pods, right? So there's always this constant journey of like, oh, you need to learn this thing in order to fully understand this other one, or in order to fully utilize this other Kubernetes concept. So I would say that that misconception that Kubernetes is so hard, you cannot learn, it's going to take too long. is also something people come in with, and because they come in with that perception, they don't fully let themselves to actually like learn Kubernetes, like give it a chance of some sort to actually utilize it. And then I would say the other thing is companies not having like a workflow, right? So let's say you have like a monolithic application right now, and you're trying to move it like microservices. It's always recommended to pick a certain part of that monolithic application and say, hey, this is the part I want done to a microservice. Move it step by step instead of trying to do every single thing immediately, because indeed, depending on how large a monolithic application is, it can take a while to move from the monolithic way of doing things to microservices. So I mean, those are like the three things that come to mind when I think of like common challenges that companies and developers face when they think of utilizing Kubernetes.
Definitely, I think they all make sense. Like, okay, organization not having the right workflow for Kubernetes, or they are not even running an application. They are not running a cloud native pattern, and they want to go
Yeah,
cloud native. So it will be a bit
because
difficult.
everybody's doing
You
it.
know. Exactly. Some people are just going to it because they hear the buzzword Kubernetes. They want to say, our company is also running on Kubernetes out there. So that's why some
Exactly.
people. So definitely try to consider what you are running and be sure that what your company is currently running is important. Or Kubernetes is important running them actually. As big as we know that it's solving a lot of problem, there's still some problem that cannot be solved with Kubernetes. That's the truth. But then it solves a lot
Exactly.
of problems basically. But then there are still problems that you may not just jump onto containerizing your application, dump into Kubernetes and start managing them. So that's very important. Yeah, we got some feedback from the chat. Somebody saying we are fast. Okay, we are sorry about that.
Oh,
Basically,
okay.
we try our best to slow down a bit. And again, if anybody have any question, try to drop it in the chat. And again, this stream will be available after the discussion. You can comment under the video on YouTube. If you are watching it on LinkedIn as well, you can do the same. And on Twitter, you can do the same. I will definitely follow up if you have a specific question or you require a specific attention. Definitely, we'll be there for you. That's why we call ourselves community. So thanks so much for
Yep.
joining. Okay, so moving on, before we take some question in the chat, I think it's important to talk about strategies that we can put in place to simplify this development or deployment process using Kubernetes. We know
Yeah.
it's a lot of things to learn. I can remember you mentioned during the introduction as well that learning Kubernetes is a bit hard because there are a lot of things you need to know. There are a lot of things you need to learn. Okay, you learn how to develop your application. If you're a developer that want to look into Kubernetes, apart from learning that, okay, you still need to learn how to containerize them. Okay, you containerize them, you now need to learn about how you can do the orchestration as a whole. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of things. So we want to hear from you. Do you have recommendation or strategies or even tools that you recommend us checking out to be able to learn Kubernetes, let me say, easily, and even implementing it in our organization or in our company very easily?
Oh, okay, sorry. Is the question about strategies on how to learn Kubernetes or
Exactly.
about okay, how to learn
I
Kubernetes?
think I
All
think we
right, so
can. Okay, sorry about that. I think we can combine the two. Okay, we can talk about the learning part first, then talk about how organization can leverage on or recommendation for organization moving into cloud native or moving into Kubernetes as a whole.
okay, so around learning, I'm going to like share it from like my experience and like what I did. So first of all, there is this open source platform called roadmap.sh where they have like different like roadmap. Let me just quickly share it in the chat so that you can share it on the on like on YouTube. All right, so this platform called roadmap.sh, it has like different roadmaps of different things like programming languages, databases, technical writing, all of this good stuff. But then it also has for like DevOps and it also has for Kubernetes as well. So one of the things that I did was like scan through this roadmap and like, because when you're learning a new thing, you don't necessarily know what to do next after a particular thing, right? Because you are new, you don't know what you do. I mean, after learning ports, how am I supposed to know that I'm supposed to learn services, or how am I supposed to know that I'm supposed to learn about like monitoring or deploying in Kubernetes or any of this other stuff? So this platform gives you a very detailed overview of the processes to take, so that you know that, okay, hey, I'm supposed to learn this first, and once I feel like I'm like comfortable in that space, then I can go ahead and learn another thing. So I absolutely recommend utilizing roadmap.sh, and you can see there on your screen the one that slashes to Kubernetes. So if you also want like the broader one that is more DevOps specific, there's also a different one where you just go roadmap.sh slash DevOps. So there's like different roadmaps there for different things you want to learn. And then another platform that I really used, and I think it's like one of the best ones out there. I also used it during my when I was preparing for my CCAD exams. So if you don't know what that means, CCAD means Certified Kubernetes Application Developer. It's like one of those certification exams that the CNCF provides for people to like write to like be sure of their skills, to also prove to like potential employers that, oh, you're actually knowledgeable about Kubernetes. So I wrote that exams, and one of the platforms that I used to prepare for these exams was Code Cloud. It was I would say it's like one of the best platforms to learn DevOps, Kubernetes, cloud native content, because they really explain things very well. Like they break down concepts, they use like real world examples, and most importantly, they have like hands on labs where you can actually test out what you've learned. Right? I absolutely believe that there's always something vital about actually trying out stuff as opposed to just like reading about it. Right? Of course, reading about it is great and awesome, but when you read about something or watch a video about something, actually trying it out yourself also really goes a long way. And then of course there's another person I need to recommend. His name is Ivan. I'm not sure. I can't remember his surname, but let me quickly do a Google search and I copy a link to his name. So Ivan Veliko. I'm probably not mentioning him very well, but I've just sent the link to his website on the chat as well. He's also he also posts a lot of content on Twitter too. Absolutely fantastic. Like one of those people who really knows his stuff, has been in the ecosystem for like a long time. So he's like very knowledgeable, and then also goes like for that to really break down concepts extremely well. Shares them, gives you like real world examples, those kind of stuff. So in terms of like learning resources, I would recommend these three places to learn. I mean, there's also the CNCF that has several resources. There's the CNCF landscape that will show you um, the different products that are in the cloud native space that can be utilized for Kubernetes or other aspects of cloud native. But I would say these are like my top three resources to utilize if you want to learn about Kubernetes. Roadmap.sh, Code Cloud, and this blog by Ivan. Fantastic people and
Yeah,
resources.
yeah. I think that's a lot of resources there to get started. Actually, I could remember I one of the resources that helped me, or the one that I enjoyed most, was using Code Clouds. When I was even using them,
Awesome.
it was then they started their ambassador program, and yes, I was
Oh,
part of the ambassador program.
oh,
Yes,
that's amazing.
I even wear that shirt today.
Oh,
Imagine.
wow. Indeed, I
Yeah.
agree.
So that's interesting. It's a very good platform to start with. You have access to labs. There's what we call co-cloud engineer, where it's like a company, like a virtual company. What you need to
Yeah.
do, they will give you a task in a day as a DevOps person, as a system engineer, even if you are doing Kubernetes on them with them. So they will assign a job, like a task to you. The normal task you will see in your day-to-day job when you get a job as a DevOps or as a Kubernetes person or whatever things you are doing in the ecosystem. So it's a very good platform. Try your best to check them out. And sometimes they do 3 weeks, and I don't think they
Oh,
are calling
yes, they
actually.
do.
So you can take their payments, the premium version out. If you learn in 2 months, 3 months, you'll be able to see changes. Then you can be able to fund yourself, and yeah, you can look. If you need help, you can reach out as well. That's possible. Okay,
I
so
think they actually have a discount. I got like an email from them, like, I think 2 days ago, about the current discount that they are running. So I think this would be
exactly.
like a really good time to check them out if you eventually want to like use Code Cloud.
Yes, thank you. I think shout out to
So
CoCloud
power
team.
is
Yeah,
out.
team went off. Okay.
Yeah, let me see if I should
Yeah, no
do
problem.
this.
Okay, while you sort that out, I think anybody that wants to check out CoCloud, you can do your best to check them out. They are not promoting this stream actually, but then
Gee, I think we
go
should
check
actually
out.
charge them money for this promotion.
Like actually, they are doing good job, so it's not bad to do a shout out to them. We appreciate what they are doing for the community. Actually, yeah. So do well to check them out, and if you need any help from any platform you are using, LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube, I will definitely be checking. If you need help, I will be reaching out to you for any kind of help you need. So, thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And I've been seeing a lot of excitement in the chat for us to see things done. Okay, we have some questions as well. But before picking those questions, I think, yeah, we have Didi back on.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, you're welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so I think we can carry on
Yep.
with a couple of questions. Then we'll get to answer people's question in the chat. There are a lot of questions in the chat that we need to attend to. Okay,
Okay.
so moving on. I think one part that we've not talked about is the organization or the company trying to embrace Kubernetes. In few words, what do you have to say to them? What do you think? How do you want them to be thinking to be able to embrace Kubernetes the right way?
I would say one thing that comes to mind first is trying to implement like deployment strategies that enables you to roll back quickly, right? So let's say when you deploy something to production, Kubernetes has like different deployment strategies. There's like I think rolling updates, canary releases, and blue green deployments, right? And each of these ones have their own benefits and different things that it can be utilized for. And of course, you need to like think about what, like read up about each of them, figure out which of them is best for the needs of your company. But then I personally would recommend implementing one that allows you to be able to quickly roll back to existing changes, right? So, for instance, you already have a certain application that is working in production, and your team has just worked on something new and pushed it to production, right? Sometimes there might be a bug that's like really not great and like people are complaining about it. Like your deployment strategy should be one way you can quickly roll back that thing you just pushed to production and take it back to the previous one that was already working, because that way um you'll be able to quickly solve the issues that your like customers or end users are experiencing. Another thing I would also say is that um, they should try to think about there's something called thinking left, or rather shifting left, right? So when you're working with like monolithic applications, like let me use testing for instance. Now, when you're working with monolithic applications, when you want to test the impact of your code changes, you pretty much just like click on hot reloading or whatever thing you have set up, and you'll be able to see the impact of your code changes immediately. But when you start using like Kubernetes, your applications are now broken into different microservices, right? And sometimes you may want to change. So let's say you have three microservices that make up an application, right? And there's something, these microservices are named microservice A, microservice B, and microservice C. So there's something wrong with microservice C, right? And then you go to your computer and you try to work on changes to microservice C. Unlike monolithic applications where you would have immediately seen the impact of your code changes because everything is together, in microservices and like with Kubernetes, that's not possible. You need to now test that this microservice C is going to work with microservice A and B together, right? So we need to, and that means that the way we think about developing, the way we think about like implementing stuff would also need to change. It's no longer the same way where you would like build code, test and then push to production. With Kubernetes, most of the time you have to like go through the process like building, deploying into the Kubernetes cluster before you now see the impact of your code changes. And what that does is actually makes it a lot. It takes a while to see the impact of your code changes. It makes it a lot harder for you to like iterate on your code changes. It makes it even harder for you to be able to test. So one thing that's always advisable for companies to do when they start utilizing Kubernetes is shifting all of these things left. And by shifting them left means thinking about them first before you push them or deploy it into a Kubernetes cluster. So is it testing? Think about, oh, how can I test my application or test this service with the other services before it's being deployed? Because once you sort that out already before deploying it, it makes it makes it a lot faster. First of all, it reduces the chances of you having bugs in production, amongst other things. And then one other thing I would say is trying to have some sort of like authorization being put in place, because sometimes, let's say you have not like really set up who has access to what clusters or who can do what inside a particular Kubernetes cluster, and then someone will now mistakenly push something to the wrong environment. Let's say they wanted to test up something in like the test environment, but they'll mistakenly go and test it in the production environment, and that would impact the entire team. So setting up authorization, setting up who can access what, would just help you to limit that, right? Because you would probably put like the engineers that are more skilled into the production environment, and people that are still like trying upcoming in like the test environment, or maybe set up something that before something is pushed to production is like an approval process, just to ensure that things do not wrong things do not get pushed to production. Those are like the things that come to mind in terms of what I would recommend for companies and businesses utilizing Kubernetes, like starting that journey. Just like I think there needs to be like a change of mindset before you start using it. When you start using it, you realize that it's not going to be exactly the same way we would typically think when we're working with monolithic applications.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of things to consider when you want to run Kubernetes as a company, or as an organization. When you are thinking cloud native, you are thinking Kubernetes. Those suggestions are very, very crucial for you to look into. And yeah, I think it's very good. Talking about this, I think it's the right time for us to talk about leveraging, talking about best practices as a whole. Okay, you want to go into Kubernetes, for instance, want to learn it, whether you want to learn it, they will tell you learning the best practices is good. And although there are some argument around best practices is not always best. Okay, so it's your
Yeah.
company that will define the best practice, what they mean by best practice actually. But then generally, for organization and developers, what do you think will be the best practices for them leveraging on Kubernetes and using Kubernetes in their day-to-day work?
Yeah, I feel like some of the best. I've like actually mentioned some of them in like the previous answer that I just gave. Trying to shift things left, like shifting testing left, shifting like your authorization, all of those stuff. Trying to make them happen before it gets deployed into a Kubernetes cluster. And then first of all, trying to understand like what exactly is important for your team. Like you clearly said, best practices may not always apply to like every single team, because a particular team is trying to achieve something different from what another team is trying to achieve, right? So I think it's always very important to like come together, or maybe just call up like maybe the engineering managers or the developers on the team to really ask yourselves, what exactly are we trying to achieve here, right? And in order for this to be sustainable, what development workflows we need to put in place to ensure that this can work, right? For instance, you want to set up like CI/CD tools to ensure that once you do like git push, that it already picks up that code change you've made, runs a test on it, and then you test how that would work with like the other services that make up the cloud native application, and then eventually ask for some permission to push it to production. So things like that, trying to think of those different components, those different things that are important to your team, and ensuring that you don't end up implementing Kubernetes and then it now makes it harder for your team to be able to work. Remember that the whole point of Kubernetes is to make us code, ship, and deploy faster. It's to also remove the whole, or it works on just my machine, because now you're actually containerizing the application and sending like a Docker image or whatever registry you're using to somebody who would then run that on their application and be able to see the run that on their laptop, be able to see the application immediately. So that's like two things that I would say in addition to what I had already said in the previous question, which I do think is also in line with these best practices, like trying to employ the right deployment strategy for your business, preferably the one that enables you to be able to roll back quickly, being able to add like the right authorizations to decide who access to what, things from like namespaces, who can access a namespace, who can do certain things in a Kubernetes cluster, or maybe sometimes we'll even go as well as like maybe giving people just rights to be able to, let's say, view things in a cluster, but not like delete or add things into a Kubernetes cluster. So just taking those extra measures to be sure that there's like lots of security in your Kubernetes cluster, and that there's a workflow that every team is aware of, or rather every member of the team is aware of, so that you guys can all utilize that. I think I would say the end goal is trying to make it easy for different developers on your team to be
Yeah.
able to utilize Kubernetes, like have like a workflow that everybody knows about and just follows that, so it does not get complicated, because it can definitely easily get complicated if you don't structure it well.
Actually, yes, I think that's very important. Having everything set up right, having the right setup is very, very good. If you don't have the right workflow, you will regret going into Kubernetes.
I'm
You don't
telling
have the
you.
right quality gate set in, you don't have everything set in very correctly. You may end up blaming yourself or even blaming your team for bringing the idea of going into Kubernetes at first. So, setting
Yeah.
everything right will make everything work well. Okay, so lastly, from my hand, before we take the chat, the questions in the chat. Okay,
Okay.
so I think let's talk about community. We talk about CNCF community and every other community that are out there supporting Kubernetes and bringing in together for everybody that is interested in Kubernetes. So, how do you think both? Let's start from people developer that want to learn about it first. How do you think these developers or DevOps engineer or whatever team we are currently doing, but I'm interested in Kubernetes, how can I leverage on community to be able to push up my career and do better things ahead?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that one of them would be remembering, or like seeing, having access to these communities as an opportunity for you to be able to get answers to questions, right? Again, when you're learning something new, when you're like starting out in like your career or in a new technology, you can feel lost sometimes. Like you don't know where to move from where, or things just seem a bit hard for you to understand, right? And oftentimes it's just because you've not found someone who can actually explain it in a way that you actually understand. So one most important thing of like leveraging communities would be knowing that this is like a place where you can find different people to help you out in one way or the other to enable you to understand a particular technology. However, this does not mean that you should solely rely on them, or that you should not put in any work on your path to try to find those answers before reaching out, because it's people like to see that you've done some sort of research on your end, and then you just need like their help as like an additional thing, instead of them trying to like figure out every single thing for you. That's one of them. The other one would be that these communities have like several events that happen. Like you mentioned, we ran like the KCD previous year. So like they have like different KCDs, KCD in Africa, which we now have like a subset version like KCD Nigeria. I know that CNCF Lagos hosted like an event a couple of weeks back. There are also like various other KCDs that are not just limited to Nigeria or Africa. So you can absolutely join those KCD events as well. And then there are like also free resources on CNCF platform. There are people who create content like articles, video content. Even this live session that we're doing right now is also part of community work, right? Because you can listen to this thing, you can probably get inspired or get to ask questions on things that you're confused about. Um, yeah, I would say that. And then I would also say another one, which is like, let's say, applying to become like a CNCF ambassador, right? Because you are now sharing your learnings with the public. You're also now like sharing your inspiration, sharing how you were able to like figure out learning about like Kubernetes, like other cloud native tools. And then now you're also now in that process where you are also giving back to the community and not necessarily just taking from it. So I would say that it's like a full rounded experience, from learning from the community and eventually giving back to other people who would be new joiners into this community that you once benefited from.
Definitely, as you are learning from the community, the best way for you to pay back is to help people in the community as well. And you will
Yeah,
not unknowingly to you, you'll be learning while helping them out, while they will be learning from you as well. And definitely, they will respect you for helping them out. Okay,
yeah.
so help people in the community. That's one of the way you can leverage on community to learn. So, what about organization? I think there are platforms that have a team that their work is to monitor all those popular discussion page like Stack Overflows, GitHub
Mm-hmm.
discussions, and all of that. So How do you think organization can leverage on Kubernetes community to be able to leverage on using Kubernetes the right way?
Yes, I mean, one of the things is also similar to what I mentioned earlier, which is asking questions, right? As an organization, you definitely have developers on the team who are using these like technologies as well. So these developers can go in to like ask questions. These developers can also write articles about things that they have implemented or things that they have learned as well, to also provide like a way or a place for people to learn about those technologies too. I would also say that another one would be trying to tax like your developers in the company to also help out with like going to Stack Overflow, going to Twitter, going to Reddit to also answer these questions as well. Because sometimes people come online and then they are like confused about how to use a particular thing. And like you said, when you help people, what you don't know is that you're actually also helping yourself in the process as well. So the developers would also get an opportunity to improve their skills by actually helping people answer these questions and just getting a sense of what people are struggling with in the market. Because truly, that would also give them ideas on like even things to implement, assuming that they are building cloud native products as well. So those are like some things that comes to mind.
Okay, I think those are nice suggestions, and I think leveraging on that will definitely help your company and helping you as a person to grow. Definitely. So I think because of our time, it's high time we take some of the questions in the chat. Yeah,
Okay.
I can see a lot of people clapping for us. Thank you so much for joining as well.
Yeah.
Said
For
app
joining.
image container Kubernetes. You get it. Actually, that's what.
Absolutely. That's like the short answer. Yes. Perfect.
Exactly. All right. So this one is talking about troubleshooting with Kubernetes when the cluster is having issues. Okay, do you want to go on that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, how I typically do mine is like try to figure out what I mean. How about the time like when something happens, you can see like an error that is causing that stuff. When you the more you work with something, the more you can already begin to tell where the problem is coming from just by looking at the error, right? So you can already think, okay, hey, maybe this is from like, maybe it could be like an access thing. Maybe it could be that I'm running this thing in the wrong namespace, or maybe I've not deployed the like the tools I need to be able to make this thing work in a Kubernetes cluster. And of course, other times you have no idea what this error is. And what I typically do is just like copy the error, go to Google and search for it. Half of the time you see like a GitHub issue where someone has already complained about the same thing, and I try to read through the entire issue to see like, oh, this is what the person complained about. This are the different opinions that other people gave. Sometimes you may end up seeing answers to that, and the other times you do not. But reading those issues just gives you a sense of like where their headspace was at when they were trying to solve this problem. And sometimes that can actually give you an idea on how to can implement or like solve the problem by yourself. And then other times is if you work in a team, reaching out to like a senior engineer or someone who you believe would have more knowledge about that thing than you. Because I mean, we can't possibly know everything, to be honest. So reaching out to someone who you think would be knowledgeable about the subject matter and then sharing like the error. Typically, like you can take a screenshot of that error message and send it to them, or just like copy the error and like paste it on like Slack or whatever platform it is you're using, and they will share their thoughts on how to debug and like figure out what is wrong with the what's wrong with the Kubernetes cluster. And another thing I would say, sometimes maybe if it's like, let's say you're using like Minikube or kind like a local cluster that you're just using like a personal project, sometimes it could just be all you need to do is like turn off your laptop and then turn it back on. Sometimes it could be like maybe closing your Docker and then restarting it. That's like sometimes that also solves the problem. There's this movie that I watched a while back, and then I think the go I think there was like a husband and a wife, right? And the wife, anytime something happened, she would always call the husband to come and solve the problem. And then he was just like, see, half of the time, all you need to do is just restart whatever is having an issue, right? Just turn it off and then turn it back on. And then I'm not joking, this stuff does wonders. Sometimes, I mean, it would make you think, okay, why is it not working? Maybe you've not even really figured it out, but it really does help sometimes to just like restart things, because maybe there is something that did not fully update or did not fully install, and that is like blocking the other things from being implemented. So I would also recommend that as well, in addition to the other things that I shared.
All right. I think thanks so much. That's a lot of strategy to get to debug or troubleshoot your Kubernetes, even your Kubernetes cluster. And as well, one thing to look into is there are tools out there that can help you out on that. Having the right GitOps tool, the tool that the agent that you install to listen to what is happening on your repository and all of that. Having all
Yeah.
those sets out right will help you in debugging what any kind of issue you're having on your cluster or on your Kubernetes as a whole. So that's a very good suggestion from Didi. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
Picking another
I just
one.
remember that I wrote an article about like debugging Kubernetes apps when I was preparing for my CCAT exam. So I just shared that on the link to the chat. So you can also share it with that person. I did share like some other more like useful tips there in case you want to check it out.
Yeah, that's nice. Let me post it once and then I'll pin it onto the screen for anyone to check it out. Okay, moving on to
Okay.
the next question because of our time rather. I believe the person should be able to get it from YouTube. That's from for people joining us from YouTube. Okay, most of our participants are from YouTube actually. Okay, moving on to the next question. The question is around having issue in production in Kubernetes on prod and all of that. Do you have any strategy for this person? Is the person said, I know Kubernetes, but I'm having issue in my prod.
I mean, I don't have context on what that issue is. Like when you say you have an issue, what exactly are you referring to? And then one thing I would say that can be helpful in this scenario is trying to roll back. Like I'm assuming that you probably had one time where you put something into production and it was working well, and then you made updates and then you realize that this one is no longer working. Just roll back to the previous one and then take out some time to debug what what may have caused this particular error when you push to production. But I mean, I don't have lots of context on like what issue you're referring to here. If I did, then I'll be able to like share like my opinion. But since I don't have that, then I can't like I don't have a lot of context, so I can't like answer that unfortunately.
Actually, that's very true. You can you can actually debug an abstract code. It's not possible.
Yeah, because I don't get it.
So,
Or maybe we
definitely,
can always like talk about this later. Maybe we can like send a message on like Twitter or like via
exactly. That would be
email, like
nice.
first last name at gmail.com. Yeah, and I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, nice, nice. That's cool. Okay, picking the last question for today. If you did not get any other question, it's around scenario and cases where Kubernetes is not recommended, or when you think we should not think about
Use it.
Kubernetes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I would say when your let's say your applications is still very small, like you're like let's say you're like a startup and you're like you've not raised funds yet, you're still like trying to figure things out, you're still like in the beginning phase. I would recommend not using Kubernetes then because as much as everybody wants you to come and like talk about it, nobody tells you the cost benefits of these things running Kubernetes clusters. Like in like let's say AWS, GCP, or Azure, or whatever platform you're using, oftentimes it can cost a lot of money. So if you do not have the resources to be able to run these clusters, then I would recommend not using it yet. That's one. And then the second one is if you let's say you do not have like the resources, and by resources I mean like the knowledge of Kubernetes. Let's say you're just like a one-man person and you're just trying to get like the idea of your company up and running. I would not recommend using Kubernetes yet. I would just recommend that you get that first bit started because it's absolutely always possible to be able to transition from like monoliths to microservices eventually. So it's only important to use Kubernetes when it's absolutely necessary. Like, do you have is your application big enough to a point where you have to like break them down into different microservices? If it is not, then do not try to use Kubernetes. Don't just use it because everybody's using it or because it's all amazing or it sounds important. Only use it when it's beneficial for you. For instance, you have several members in your company and you want different people to work on different aspects of the application, or you plan on building a really big application and you want to segment these applications into different microservices. So if the thing you're building requires structures like that, then yes, please go for it. But then if it doesn't, I'd recommend you just follow like the monolithic way to build your application and get it up and working until the time where you now have the resources to be able to move. And then when you are ready to move, can now start moving slowly. Like, oh, you have this big application. What do I want to make a microservice first? The first one could be, let's say, I want to make the homepage. And then you decide, okay, hey, let's bring out the homepage and turn it into a microservice. And then you're done with that. Oh, let's bring out the authentication and turn it into a microservice. Oh, you're done with that. And then you bring them out bit by bit into several microservices that will eventually now make up this application. But the difference here is that at this point in time, first of all, you're more knowledgeable about what Kubernetes is. Your company is at a better point to be able to handle the financial cost of doing this. And then you also have different developers in your team who would be focusing on these different individual microservices.
All right. Thanks so much. I think that's a lot of suggestion on what to focus on when not to use Kubernetes. Okay, you're running a smaller application. Even if you are running a bigger application and your company is running well, my advice is let's focus. Let's be using what we are using. But then, because a lot of things comes with using Kubernetes, you think about the cost, you think about the management, and all of that. So definitely,
Mm-hmm.
it's all good to leverage on using those technology. But then thinking about other aspects is very, very important for you to decide for your company if you're a DevOps engineer, because most time they will ask you as a DevOps engineer or platform engineer, they will ask you, okay, should we move to Kubernetes? What do you think? So if your company does not need that, do your research well before taking that decision of telling them, let's move to Kubernetes. So
Yeah.
scaling, all of that that comes with Kubernetes is very good, is very important. But then if you have a right infrastructure running already, I would advise not to just jump into Kubernetes and end up blaming yourself or bringing trouble into the company as a whole. So thank you
Yeah.
so much everyone for joining us. Those are the questions I will be taking from the chat today. So it's our tradition here to ask our guests, asking them about their final thoughts, what they had think we should be thinking when we are thinking about Kubernetes. I don't know, maybe that's a rhyme, but that what we are trying to achieve is okay, your thoughts around
Um,
Kubernetes or leveraging on Kubernetes.
Yeah, I would say that I definitely believe that there will be a point in time where almost all the companies would move to the cloud because that's where the world is moving into. There's like more tech stuff coming in. There's more like cloud based, like more like as every day passes by, we begin to see more and more the importance of your applications being on the cloud, right? So I do think that this is something that is very has a chance of like being very future prone, right? It doesn't look like something that's going to stop anytime soon or not be relevant anytime soon. So I would definitely recommend like checking it out, even if you just want to, let's say you're not working in a company and you're trying to look for a new skill to build upon. I would say that like getting up with Kubernetes, cloud native technologies is a good one, especially because at this point in time the market is not very saturated, let's say compared to doing like web development, for instance. So there continues to be more like job opportunities for it, continues to be more benefits of utilizing it, and like more support from the community as well. So yeah, I definitely would say that getting on the Kubernetes and like cloud native bandwagon at this point is would be a good decision to make. I mean, assuming it aligns with like your career path and what you're looking to implement in your company.
Yeah, I think that's a lot needed to take home, something that we need to think around. So definitely. So thanks so much for sharing that with us. We really appreciate that. We appreciate you for joining us this evening. A lot of things happened before the stream. Actually,
All right.
thanks so much for joining, and to our participants, we really appreciate you for joining as well. If you have any question, you can reach out. You can comment wherever platform you are watching from, Twitter, or they call it X. Okay, or you are watching from YouTube, or you are watching from LinkedIn, whatever platform you are using, definitely comment there, and yeah, I will definitely pick your question there and help you out on anything. So thanks so much for joining. And if you want to learn about Kubernetes, there are resources that we'll be sharing more on this channel. Do well to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, if you're not on YouTube, you can find link to the YouTube and subscribe as well. So thanks
Yep.
so much everyone for joining. And I guess to the next session that we'll be having, I think that should be open source Wednesday. You will see an announcement. If you subscribe and turn on the bell notification, you will see a notification telling you that that's a show on its own where we talk about open source, how you can get into open source. So do well to check everything out. It will definitely help you and help your career. So till next time, see you again. Bye bye everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming.